backstitch. Backstitch is one of the most foundational stitches. It's very simple and effective. It's really good for line work, and I'm just going to show you how I like to do it. So I have some linen fabric already hooped up. I have 3 strands, which is my default, of a 6-strand cotton embroidery thread, threaded, and I've tied a knot on the back. I've drawn on 2 lines with a heat erasable pen, and if you need help with any of this, you can check out some of my other videos on it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just bring my needle up through the back of my fabric to the front and pull it all the way through to the knot. I am going to make a single stitch, a straight stitch, by coming down along that line, bringing my needle back through the fabric and pulling it all the way through. I'm not pulling very tightly, just a little bit firm. And then I'm going to come back up about a 1/4 inch away from that stitch. And I am coming up and away from it. And then I'm bringing my needle back down to meet the first stitch to make the line seamless. I'm going to come back up along the line a little bit away from my second stitch and come back down to meet the second stitch. So I'm coming up and back into each one of my stitches, and that's why it's called backstitch. And when you do this, you want your stitches to be not too long, or else they will be a little bit looser. The longer your stitches, the looser it is. But they also don't have to be teeny tiny. I default to something around 1/4 inch, or I think this is about 1/2 centimeter, maybe, which is, you know, a little bit smaller than my pinky nail, but not super duper tiny. So you can see I've made a nice straight line. You can see a little bit of texture from my stitches, but not too much, especially head on. And I'm just going to come over to my other line and start the process again, but working on this curve. So when it comes to stitching on a curve, one thing that you want to keep in mind is that the tightness of your curve, so like how small or large it is and how softly or harshly it curves, is going to dictate the size of your stitch. So if you're stitching along a nice large curve, you can make the stitches a little bit longer, but if you are stitching along a very tight, small curve, you want to make them shorter so that you can make those turns more smoothly and precisely. So on this slightly tighter curve, I'm going to make my stitches just a tiny bit shorter, just so that I can turn that curve really smoothly. Can even make it a little bit shorter than that. And of course, one of the other things that you want to keep in mind is the evenness of your stitches. My stitches are not identically the same size, but they are, you know, relatively close. And as, you know, not a perfectionist, I think that that's fine enough. Now that I've finished, I've flipped over to the back, and I am going to just run my needle underneath these stitches in the back side. I'm not going through the fabric at all, but rather just wrapping my thread around the back a couple times and snipping it off, and that will hold just fine. So you can see how these stitches are slightly shorter and smaller as compared to these longer stitches on the bottom here, and that's because that has that really gentle sloping curve where this turns rather tightly and quickly. So that's our back stitch.